Yeah, we're live. Episode 4 with Daddy Issues. Starring myself. We got co-star Dan Modern. And
What
we
up,
have
what up?
our lovely guest, Chris, who's a family attorney at law, if you will. And we would love to hear any questions you may have for him regarding, divorce and child support and all those things that go along with it. We were asking him a little bit about it. He's been in, if you want to tell him how long you've been practicing. And
20 years, almost 20 years. Family law, every aspect of family law. We didn't talk about asset division and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
let's keep talking and then
Yeah.
see what. Yeah, perfect.
So a lot of people, in addition to the custody, get over that hurdle, and they're wondering what equity do I get out of this? So a lot of people come to me and say, well, the house is in my name, the car is in her name, like we don't have to deal with those. And that's not accurate. So the court starts from the proposition of if you're married, everything you own is a joint asset. Everything you owe is a joint debt. Even if it's only in one party's name. If you're married, you're both in the game. So when you get divorced, you've got to figure out what equity is going to each side. So the court's going to start from the proposition that we're just going to split it down the middle 50-50. And if you want to deviate from that, again, the burden's on you. And the most common reason to deviate from that 50-50 split is if you got married and you own the house prior to marriage, were married and then got divorced, you had some equity in the house before the marriage. So that would be your separate equity.
Okay.
So you kind of got to figure out how much the house appreciated during the marriage,
So you can figure
and
out
then
the difference.
half of that goes to each side.
Okay.
So there's sometimes it's not an exact science because when you get married, who does an appraisal of all your assets when you get married? So you kind of got to guess at what the value of some things were.
What's messier, getting divorced or going through, custody of children?
Definitely the children.
Yeah, just because it's children and it's probably affecting more.
Right. You can always make more money. You can, replenish your retirement account, but you're not going to get more time with your kids when they're, young or when they're teenagers. Like you're never going to get that time back.
Yeah,
So that's way more emotional.
yeah.
Viewers have any questions?
Shoot, Hamill. We
Okay.
got Hamill tuning in. All right.
All right. What up, Hammer? What up? What up?
We got some people. So if anyone has any questions or anything, feel free to shoot a comment and we'll ask. Or we'll answer.
Well, actually, we probably should ask him about the child support thing. 'Cause that's probably a big one that a lot of people. So our viewers we asked them earlier, but we'd love to answer it again. How is child support determined for people going through divorce with kids?
So there's a formula. You just plug in the numbers into the formula, and the formula will give you a number. Now, the formula requires income. Now, the definition of income is really broad. Essentially, any money you get on a regular basis is counted as income. Income for both sides goes in the formula. The number of children depends on the percentage that's going to get paid. And then you can take certain deductions like medical deductions, health insurance, childcare expenses, things like that. Those come off the top. There's a self-support reserve that's taken out. And then whatever's left after the deductions is calculated into the formula. So it'll give you a number,
Okay.
and that's the starting point. The court doesn't necessarily end there, but if you want to deviate either upwards or downward, the court requires you to bear the burden of proof. So you're going to have to explain to the judge why you want to use a different number.
Less or more, depending on whatever that's agreed upon.
Right.
Okay.
And then there's, under the statute, you can go back and modify child support. Once every 3 years, you're entitled to a review or any change in circumstances, substantial change in circumstances. You lose your job, You
Okay.
make less money, you have an operation, you're out of work for a while. You want to let the court know as soon as possible because the date that you let the court know is the date the court can go back and change that amount that you pay.
Well, what happens? What happens with that money that you've already paid?
And then
Do they give you a break for those couple months or whatever, or are they like, well, you already paid it, so clearly you could handle it?
Right. So I'm just going to make up numbers here. So if you're paying $1,000 a month in child support, you file the request to modify. You wait 3 months to get into court, and your modification goes down to $500. So those 3 months that you essentially overpaid those 3 months.
Yeah. So you don't have to pay anything for 3 months.
Well, you have a $1,500 credit,
Oh, okay.
which is going to reduce the amount that you're paying, but it's not going to negate it.
Gotcha.
So the court will give you a percentage reduction.
Yeah. Until you're back at even.
Right.
Yeah. Can it ever switch? You know what I mean? Like the man's paying child support and essentially he's not making enough money. Can she end up paying child support, or the woman, or whatever? Has that ever happened?
Yeah, it's a numbers game.
Right. So they have to file it within 3 years or whatever in the time frame.
For the modification?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're entitled to review once every 3 years for any reason. And you can file a request anytime following a change in circumstances.
Yeah.
So the gender isn't important in
Right.
the formula.
Who's making more
Right,
money?
It's just whoever's making the most money is the one that typically pays.
Yeah. I think that would suck, but it would also be kind of funny. Because like
What?
they're feeling your pain a little bit
Oh,
if the tables got turned. But not that I want it to happen to anybody. I'm
We
just
don't
saying
want it
it'd
to
be
happen
kinda
at all.
funny. Just saying it would be funny.
So, so once child support is agreed upon, who determines how long the child support is paid, or is it a certain age? The kid's older,
they're 18,
or
right?
I'm assuming it's 18. But can it ever, like, let's say we agreed like child support will stop at once the child is working? Does that ever come into effect?
Actually, yeah, it does.
You know
That's
what I
a
mean?
good question.
Or what if the mom is working now and she can make enough money on her? Like,
Because if it's for
how
the
is it-
kids and they get a job and they're working, then it's like,
or she has a job now, maybe because she wasn't working before. Like the husband was the breadwinner, if you will.
So under the statute, child support's payable until the age of 18 or
Older.
completion of high school, whichever's later. So if you're a senior and you're 18, you got 4 more months of high school, you got 4 more months of child support. And then there's sort of the presumption that when you hit adulthood, you're responsible for yourself. Once you get out of high school, you're responsible for yourself. Now there are exceptions. You can end it early if you join the military or something like that. There are some circumstances where it would end early, but it's not very common.
but now what happens if that kid gets a job? Nothing. It just doesn't matter.
You
Yeah.
you could go back and request a modification and sort of make that argument
Yeah.
and see what the judge does with it.
Right.
But an agreement to continue child support, if you guys have an agreement to pay it until your kid wants to travel Europe when they graduate high school, so you want to pay child support for the summer after they graduate, you can enter into an agreement for that.
Yeah.
The court would have no ability to enforce it because they're going to lose jurisdiction. The family court's going to lose jurisdiction when the kid times out.
Gotcha.
So it'd be a private agreement between the two of you. She might have, take you to small claims court to enforce the agreement, but the family division wouldn't be able to enforce it.
Gotcha. Oh, you have some action over there?
Just seeing if the volume's all right. I think it's lagging on my end, but it's all good.
What was my question?
It's just about child support and who's
I
paying
wasn't,
what.
Wasn't child support. It was
Does anyone have any questions in the chat? This is your chance to ask an attorney and not pay any money.
oh jeez.
Put a donation box at the bottom. But
So when did you get divorced?
I got actually divorced in March. of
This year.
of this year. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And how was your experience?
Well, it was painful internally because obviously that's not something that I ever wanted ever. But in terms of like the court experience, stuff like that, it was actually probably opposite of a lot of the stereotype or what people hear. It was very, very peaceful and actually very, very quick. Obviously, we were friends and we were, great communication and stuff like that, which probably really helped everything. But I mean, it was definitely I didn't really feel there was any like male bias. I didn't feel like there was, the judge asked, what's up and and reviewed it and pretty much granted it, if you will. It was pretty.
Which court was it?
It was the one right in Dover, Dover, New Hampshire. Yeah.
The only thing that I find hard about it is it's like this is your life, and they're only taking, depending on how many times you go, usually once and then you have a final, or one time then you have a final or something, depending on the circumstance. But you have an hour and then you have to split that hour 30 minutes with the other side. So really you have a half an hour to explain your case. And this is your life. You know what I mean? Like, and it's not that much time to explain however many years you were with this person or with your kids or however old they are. I just feel like it's not a good system at all. And it's, yeah.
So I'm not going to disagree with you on that one. And I will tell clients, I'm not here to try to convince you you're going to get treated fairly, that you're going to like the process.
Yeah.
I'm just here to help you get through it as quickly as possible.
Gotcha.
And when you get through it, if you want to call up the legislature and talk to the family law committee,
Right.
I'll help you do that. But right now, we just got to get through the hearings.
Okay, so Gabriel asked, what if child support isn't filed until child becomes a teen? Are you forced to pay support
Going back
before previous year? So back pay? Are you forced to pay back pay child support?
That's
No.
aggressive. If that was
You only have to pay from when it was filed, right?
Right.
Yeah.
From
okay.
when it was filed is the date that it's going to start. So if somebody, let's say hypothetically, a couple got divorced, separated when the kid was 5, and then 10 years go by, and finally somebody decides at 15, I want to get some child support, and I'm owed 10 years. You just waived all that 10 years of child support.
Yeah.
And even there's a Supreme Court case that says even if the two parents enter into an agreement for child support, it's in writing, there's no question, that's not an enforceable agreement. So even if you go to the family court to try to enforce that, the judge has no authority to force that back child support. You have to file with the court because only the court can approve a child support obligation.
Gotcha. Hopefully you heard that. And hopefully that answered your question.
Do you have any more?
No, not yet. Waiting on any questions. We kind of we talked for a little bit. We talked for about a half an hour before we went live, so he said thanks, so it did. So we were already kind of asking him questions, and you guys can hear the full episode when we post it up. But if you guys have any questions about anything, post a comment, and we'll ask. So
has your experience been the same as his, Dan?
Absolutely not.
That's what's crazy.
Yeah, we have completely different sides.
Two different relationship journeys, two different pivotal, I wanted a family, necessarily didn't. I want a family right now, and then now we have a different divorce result, and he's still in a very, difficult situation.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the tough part is, I don't even like going to court. I don't like the whole process. I don't like, paying a bunch of money for it. I think it's a waste of time. I feel like we could figure it out, but, it takes two to figure it out. So just a shitty process.
It is tough when you're dealing with what you perceive to be an unreasonable parent.
Yeah.
Especially if that parent who you think is unreasonable lawyers up, then you're going to perceive that lawyer as being unreasonable. And now you're fighting both of them,
Yeah.
which may or may not be realistic from your perspective. There are some unreasonable attorneys out there, which is unfortunate, but
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. I wish we never had to. Oh, I've been out of frame for a minute. I wish I never had to go through this, but so Missy asks, what if a father or mother, I'll throw that part in there, can't pay?
so child support is based on the formula, and the formula should take into consideration your ability to pay. But the court is wrong sometimes. The court's not infallible, so sometimes they enter the wrong amount. Or a change happens after the obligation is issued. You can go back and request that it be modified. If you can't pay the child support obligation, you can file, or probably should file, a request to modify the court and explain why it can't be paid. You should do that before you miss a date for payment.
Now, does that just look better if you do it beforehand?
It looks better because it looks like you're not ignoring the court
Right.
order.
Yeah.
Because the child support obligation is a court order.
Yeah.
And if you don't pay it, the other side can file a motion for contempt and ask that you be held in contempt, which could include paying the other side's legal fees.
Mm-hmm.
So the sooner you put the court on notice, the better it's going to be for you for a couple different reasons.
That's a lot.
Now, do you think the court made your experience worse, or?
Boy,
Ooh,
I don't
like
think he
this.
made
I
it.
like this.
I don't think they made it worse. I think that the judge was actually very fair on giving me time, and really looked at the kids to give that 50-50 split. Yeah, I'm just, it is what it is. I would pay anything for my kids anyways. Obviously, I get frustrated when I have to give my money to her. Even though it's going to the kids, I would rather pay out of my pocket to my kids than give to her. But yeah, I mean, I think he did. I think the court system was fair, and it wasn't a bad thing. So, I mean, I'm glad I went. Definitely glad that I went, and now I can be a dad. So, yeah.
And the court seemed like it was kind of a non-entity for you. You had an agreement you just gave to the court to approve.
Yeah, I was actually hoping it would slow it down and
Oh, really?
and
Moving too fast.
it was actually really way too quick. But I mean, and all kidding aside, I mean it wasn't all the maybe the fear or the prejudice that I thought I might go through, whether it was being a male or black male or father. I really did not feel it or see it at all. It was kind of just they looked at the case, looked at the needs and the wants, and then they, off you go.
Now, with your first, did you have to go to court with that, or was that just you
that
and
one-
her?
Yeah, well, we were never married. We were
Right,
never-
right. But just with the
just with the kids. We
kids,
just
yeah.
were able to work it out, luckily enough. So
that's awesome.
I got
You've gone through it twice.
Well, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. See, he's
Yeah,
lying
no, no,
he's
no.
lying to you already. He's
No,
not
no,
telling
no,
you the
no,
whole
no.
story.
You had an agreement both times?
Well, the first he's making it seem like it's crazy. No. The first one was just a relationship, a 3-4 year relationship that we ended up having a child together and worked it out where we did not go the court route, and we worked out just having 50-50, or I have her a little more now, but that's just because of scheduling and things like that. But and then when we got married, that's when we went through the actual divorce system, and with my second,
Right.
and then that one, lucky enough, did not have any like agreements, whether it was child support or custody or anything like that.
So that's interesting. You bring up a good point, because if on your first one you didn't go to court,
Mm-hmm.
not everybody needs to. If you can deal with each other, great. I tell all my clients, I hope there comes a point where you don't even know what your final decree is, because that seems like a miserable existence. If the other side calls and wants to change or do something, and you've got to run to find the court order.
Yeah.
That just seems miserable. So
I mean, that's literally, that's what happens sometimes when something's said or, vacation time or anything. I always have to, double check to make sure, when it's shitty to do that. I want to be like, sure, you take them that time and I'll take, you know what I mean? But yeah, we're still at the process where we have to double check our paperwork.
I hope for every client I have that someday they don't even know where the order is.
Yeah.
That would be great for them. Others I know will never have it. Will always have it hanging on the refrigerator, so they can access it whenever they need it.
That's aggressive.
That's
when you know shit's going down when you have it every morning. You're walking by.
Yeah, that's rough. So if there's a custody agreement, could that be modified as well, like child support?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a modification statute. So if you guys are always free by agreement. In fact, the court really doesn't look for issues where none exist. So if you guys have an agreement, great. The court's going to make a decision in the areas where there is no agreement. So in your case, you guys had an agreement on everything. Mm-hmm. And in your case, you guys
nothing.
But there is a middle ground where some people come in and they have an agreement on half of the stuff, so they can have a partial agreement, and you can submit it to court and say, we agreed on this stuff, but we need you to decide on this stuff.
Yeah. So the judge will decide on that stuff because they can't come to an agreement.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
Action over there.
So what was your biggest fear going into it?
Honestly, I thought that, first it would, from hearing stories, obviously just from the male perspective in terms of just, the father doesn't have a lot of weight, in terms of value and it's kind of like he's out of the picture, and then you're slapped with basically a bill, and you've kind of lost twice. And then the other perception, obviously, being, a black man with kids, kind of oh, here's another, not degenerate of society, but, just another issue, another number, and another guy that's not taking care of his kids and things like that. So walking in, obviously, I'd like to hold myself to a high standard. And so I was a little worried that, he might view me as I might get viewed negative by, 2 times, being a black father and then going through, a divorce, and then having a blended family that we had. So it's kind of like the stereotype, the father. So all that stuff was very, very fearful. And then in terms of, having a failed marriage is hard enough. So I definitely, that was a big thing, kind of at least, hey, hear my, side. Not that I'm trying to argue, but at least know that I'm here to make to help to resolve it so we can move on, not to fight or be hostile. So those were my 3 biggest fears that I had, which luckily enough, overall did not come to fruition, if you will.
Did you have an agreement when you went in there, or you kind of worked it out as you went along?
Most of it was worked out. Obviously, when we went filing, it was a lot of things that we didn't, a lot of things that we weren't just familiar with, that we had to do. But most of it was already, we had a couple good conversations, in terms of, make sure we, have the kids 50-50, or at least make sure whenever you need the kids or vice versa, it's always, that thing is always on the table. By doing that, we never had to really work out financial situation. I'd say, we're a team, we have our kids for the next, 15 years. So obviously if there was a catastrophic event, especially financially, I would be there, just like if, I would expect the same, things like that. So that's kind of how we worked it out. And then, we, in terms of other healing and apologizing and things like that. And so when we got to the, filing jointly, it was pretty that. We obviously had to ask a few questions to the people, and then they answered them, and well, that was it.
Sure.
So, my bad. Rome has a question that I think got answered earlier, but Does basic living expenses get factored into child support percentages?
Not specifically. The formula gives you a number, and it doesn't take into account your living expenses. Now, it's called a self-support reserve, which is kind of set aside for you to support yourself, but that's only like $900 and something. You're not going to live on that. But when you go to a hearing, one of the things you'll have to fill out is called a financial affidavit. And one of the pages is your monthly expense form, where all your expenses are going to go on there. And if you have reasonable expenses that exceed your income, that's one of the things the court can take into consideration under the statute, and that would entitle you to request a deviation. Now, what the judge does with it is up to the judge. You're not entitled to it, but you can ask for it.
Nice. Rome, I hope that answered your question. Missy also has a question. Is it better to have a lawyer with dealing with the courts with this type of situation, child support, and all that falls under this as far as having plan for your children and so on?
So every case is different. It's always helpful to have an attorney do the paperwork, or at least review the paperwork that you come up with in mediation to make sure nothing's missed or nothing falls through the gaps. If you fill something out incorrectly, you could prejudice your rights potentially. So it's always helpful to have at least somebody review it. Now, whether or not you need an attorney, it depends on how complicated your case is. Some cases, people get along, don't want attorneys because they think attorneys are going to make it that much more difficult, which can be true. Sometimes it's not uncommon for a case to say, both sides say, I don't want an attorney. Halfway through, one side gets an attorney, and then the other side feels obligated to get an attorney. So it just depends on how complicated your case is and how confident you are, Missy, in moving forward.
All right. Well, shout out to Jerem and Lexi for jumping on.
What up?
My boy Jerem, I haven't seen Jerem doesn't even need to be watching this because
Yeah,
he's doing good. He's doing good with it.
No kids. He has no
He does.
Girl.
He has a baby.
He does?
Oh yeah, and a girl.
All right, what
he's
up?
doing good.
Welcome to the Father Club.
So, yep, it answered Rome's question. So yeah, I mean, if we do you have any other questions? Anything you want to talk about a little bit?
I know you said. I think we asked you this earlier, but maybe the viewers should probably hear. So should you, once you file for, I guess when you file, because I forget how it went. Should you get an attorney before you file, or should you get an attorney after you file the petition of divorce?
You could do either.
Or is there a benefit to doing either way?
Well, there's a benefit to having an attorney just handle it from the beginning to the end, because then you don't have to have somebody jump in the middle and play catch up and try to get up to speed. But sometimes that's not realistic. People don't have money. Mm-hmm. They try to do it on their own, figure out it's more complicated, or the agreement they thought they had falls apart. Or there's any number of reasons why an attorney might come on after the initial filing. Gotcha. But the initial filing is it's not that complicated. In fact, you can go onto the court's website. If you Google search New Hampshire Judicial Branch, you'll see drop-down menus for every court. And the form to start a divorce is right in there. It's just a fill-in-the-blank form. All you're doing is really giving everybody's identity, name, address, the contact information, any children, where they've lived for the past few years, and then what you want the court to do, whether it's, these are check-off-the-box issues, child support, parenting plan, things like that. And that's just the first domino that falls. Now, once that gets filed, then sort of events start to line up that have deadlines. But the initial filing is pretty simple. It's just like 3 or 4 pages. And really, it's just fill in the blanks, so really anybody could do it.
Okay.
And in fact, in New Hampshire, you can have what's called limited scope legal fees, legal services rather, where if you don't want to pay an attorney to go to court and handle the whole hearing from beginning to end,
Yep.
you can come to my office, sit with me for a few hours, and I will prepare you for the hearing. What you want to introduce, what you're going to say, things like that. What's the scope of the hearing, what the judge is going to want to hear from you, things like that. Help you prepare your exhibits. So you end up getting out for much cheaper, but still have the assistance of an attorney when you go into court. So that's helpful.
There's a lot of options there.
Yeah, so that's helpful if you feel comfortable speaking for yourself. It's another option for you.
Yeah, see, I would never want to do that just because I wouldn't want to get anything wrong. I would always want,
Well,
someone
that's
there.
Yeah, that's the tough part because you can prepare somebody to go into court
Yeah,
and they start following the script, and the judge asks you a question.
that you don't, yeah. You don't
Suddenly
understand.
you're off script.
Yeah.
You're kind of on your own at that point.
Rome said he'll be reaching out soon, LOL.
Oh, geez, what up, Rome?
But no, it was good. Missy, I think, don't get me wrong, but I think is Rome's first.
Oh, wow.
And, she's very supportive of the show. And she was like, you guys are doing a great job. So, and they're both, Rome and Missy are both watching. So shout out to them. And it's awesome that they can get along. And I think he has a kid who's 17 I
or
believe.
18,
So
yeah.
they're already, they've been through, they've been through it all. So
So your relationship, would it be safe to say, is sort of just has always been kind of steady throughout the divorce process?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, obviously, it wasn't. Some parts it wasn't easy. Of course, it wasn't like picture perfect, but I mean, overall, yes, it was. We were always able to. There was never a time that we weren't able to communicate or reach out or make sure that I made sure that she saw the kids and have them and obviously never talked bad about her to the kids or anything. All those stories that might obviously impact the pain one's feeling to obviously when you get to court to lash out and try to have it your way, highway kind of thing. So it was very, 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 very lucky.
So it's good the court didn't sort of make it worse.
No, that's what I was worried. I thought they would try to like really kind of separate things and kind of, bias towards men because obviously we hear for every reason, you hear a lot more stories on, when it comes to like a single dad, it kind of loses out, which I'm not sure if that's true, and obviously I haven't done enough research on that data. But
well, I mean, in your cases, is there a bias, or do you see a bias, or?
Well, the toughest thing for me representing dads is historically dads are still the breadwinners. Mm-hmm. So under the statutes, there's a presumption that we're going to look at a 50-50 parenting plan. Great. That helps the dad, no doubt. But when you get over here to the child support side, there's a presumption that the child support obligation is correct when you run the formula.
Yeah.
And the formula right now doesn't take into account the percentage of time dad has the kids. Mm-hmm. So if you have a 50-50 dad, which is the presumed parenting plan is a 50-50 split or roughly equal times, you get over here to the finances and you're not entitled to that same presumption of a reduction in child support when you have your kids 50% of the time.
Yeah.
So you're still facing a 50-50 parenting plan and 100% child support.
Full child support, yeah.
So that's tough. That's probably the toughest aspect now of representing dads.
Yeah, Rome actually has a pretty good question here. Parents living in 2 different states, what child support guidelines are followed? The state for the kids, attend school, etc.
So there was a time when there were a bunch of different laws in every state was different, but in order to avoid what he's referring to, because people could essentially forum shop, I'm going to move to Massachusetts because it's better for me down there and get divorced down there. So every state has since then adopted the UCCJEA, which is the Uniform Jurisdiction Child Custody Enforcement Act, which essentially says as long as one person lives in the state of New Hampshire is going to retain jurisdiction.
Yeah. So whatever state you started out with
Right.
With the
The
marriage
co-
or
with
the
the-
divorce?
The divorce.
Okay. Okay.
So if you, let's say a couple started in New Hampshire, filed for divorce, and then mom moves to Maine, dad's in New Hampshire.
yeah.
New Hampshire still has jurisdiction because one party is still here.
Yeah.
So whenever there's a hearing, mom's got to come back to New Hampshire for that hearing. Now, let's say halfway through this, dad decides he's going to move to Massachusetts. Now, nobody's left in New Hampshire. New Hampshire no longer has jurisdiction.
Oh wow. Even through halfway through the case.
If nobody's here, New Hampshire doesn't have jurisdiction anymore.
Wow. Okay.
So at that point, it's essentially a race to the courthouse to see whether Massachusetts or Maine is going to take over.
Right. So whoever files first
Whoever-
gets the.
Yeah, whoever files
Wow.
first, and if they kind of file at the same time, under the statute, the judges in Maine and Massachusetts may have to have a conversation to figure out
Yeah.
which state.
Who should take it?
Oh, gee, yeah.
Damn.
It's going to depend on,
How bad it is. I ain't dealing with this. It's like they don't. I'm assuming they don't do that.
well, they're going to talk about what, if it goes to a contested hearing, where do the majority of witnesses live?
Gotcha. Okay.
State are they closer to, and they're going to get into a whole bunch of stuff. But it might come down to the judges have to decide between themselves,
Right.
Where the court case
Where it
is
should
gonna
be. Wow. That was actually a really good question.
Yeah, that's Rome.
That was Rome.
All right, big Rome.
All right, big boy. Sweet.
Oh man, that's good.
So, in your experience, has the court made it better for you guys as co-parents, or
They
He's
How
against
can
it. He's,
I
like, he's
word
against
this?
it. He hates it.
No, they allowed me to be a parent, which I am so grateful for. I'm just still on the fence just like we just said about the 100%, you have almost 50%, but yet you're paying 100% child support. I'm on that fence. It's like, how do you expect me to live my life and I, barely pay my bills when I'm, putting so much out every month. It's like,
right? So the court has awarded you like a 50. You can be a 50% dad,
right.
but then they took it away from you by saying
You have to pay 100%.
right. But that's not realistic because you got to now work.
It's
pay
insane.
100% child support.
Right. And but also thank God for my work. I have to leave early on the days that I have my kids during the week to go pick them up from school. So every day that happens, I'm leaving like 2.5 hours early or 3 hours early to go pick them up. You know what I mean? That adds up at the end of the week. So it's like, and then it's like, oh well, you can get someone out, get a babysitter to pick them up. Okay, well I'm gonna stay at work, pay someone to. It's the same thing. I'm still losing the money. So it's. I'm mad at that aspect of it, but as long as I can see my kids, I'll essentially pay whatever. But it's crazy to think that how are you supposed to live and have your kids half the time and pay full child support?
Right. There's every so many years the state revisits the formula and how they calculate child support,
Yeah,
and every time they do that, there's a UNH study.
I'm gonna meet those people. I want to be at that meeting.
I think it came out last summer. I might be wrong about the date, but the most recent study that UNH did, they recommended taking into account the percentages of parenting time.
Oh, so they just did that. Okay.
Yeah, there were only a couple recommendations that came out moving forward, and that was one of them.
Yeah.
Because I think New Hampshire is one of the few states that the formula doesn't take that into consideration right now. Like I know in Colorado, if you have the kids 50% of the time, the other side is never going to get more than 50% of the child support calculation. Like that's in their formula.
Yeah.
But we don't do that yet. And that was one of the recommendations to change going forward.
Right. Well, ROMAS, is it open to the public? I'm not sure.
Is the
The decision of is it a voting system to do that?
Oh,
who
okay.
decides that? The legislators, the Republican, who handles all that?
so there's
I'll get a group. I'll march down there.
Oh, gee,
Next
the
meeting.
Black Panthers coming through.
Yeah, the study, he said.
there's a committee at UNH that does a study and passes it along to the legislature, and the legislature makes a determination.
But now, so why do they have UNH figuring that out? Like what's
UNH probably kissed up to the right people and got a grant of some sort. So, I'm not
So they have to do
entirely
research for them. As
so we gotta
punishment.
go apply for UNH to get into UNH. Man,
That's
it's just crazy. Especially, is it UNH? Obviously, it's not going to be students. Is it professors or like? I feel like you need people that have been in the situation maybe to make the calls on that, or at least share some light about that situation. Not people who haven't gone through any of it and just have no clue.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a big difference between sitting in your office and reading some academic books
Yeah,
versus
living through
lived
it.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
what's he saying now. What is Big Rome saying?
No, Rome's is just as excited as we are. He's ready to march.
That is wild because if the court or the system is supposed to at least go from a 50-50 standpoint, but they're still going off certain aspects of the male being the breadwinner, or maybe that's where the bias comes from financially anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the male being the breadwinner is because, which is not, and I'm saying that it's not a bad thing, but mothers are more, let me stay home with the kids and raise the kids, and the dad's off working, So I think that's why a lot of males are the breadwinners because, that's kind of the role that's always been.
So wait, so hold on. Is child support? So do you have to? What if you never got married? You just had a child with the
So you're talking
other
about
one?
me? So my situation?
Is the percentages still the same, like in terms of assets and stuff, like and all that stuff? Do you know what I
Well,
mean?
no, that's separate though. Isn't that separate?
Because child support's still the same. Then.
Right. Child support's the same, but then you'd
Right.
be paying alimony, right?
Well,
If you're married.
so if you're married, you file child support and alimony. But if you're not married and you filed, you can all you
you
can
get
do
is
is
child
file
support,
child
right.
support.
Well, a parenting petition is the parenting plan, child support. They're going to come up with your routine schedule and things like that.
Okay.
But because the couple wasn't married, the court doesn't have any jurisdiction to divide assets.
Oh, okay.
So if in your case,
Yeah, if you were about to answer that a different way, I was about to flip this podcast would be
that's
over.
Why I was staring
About to
at him.
flip this
That's why I
table.
was staring at him.
no, but in your case, and this happens sometimes, people don't get married and they live as if they are married, buy a house together.
But I
have all that
thought
stuff in the
it
name.
was 10 years. If you're with someone for 10 years, then you could get. It's almost like you're married, but it's not. You know what I mean? Like, isn't there a thing like that?
You're talking about a common law marriage.
Yes.
A lot of places it's like 7 years. I think I'm not licensed in Massachusetts. But
Yeah.
that number sounds familiar. But in New Hampshire, there's no set number of years.
Oh,
And in fact, a common law marriage doesn't spring into being unless you die. So if you guys held yourself out to be a couple
yeah,
for
20 years.
20 years, just making up numbers.
Yeah.
You die and you held everything as if you were married.
Yeah,
She can claim to be your surviving spouse. even though you
gotcha.
weren't married.
But if you break up, then nothing.
Right, but
Yeah.
if the day before you die, you tell her you're out of the relationship, she's done.
But someone else would have to hear that, right?
Well, yeah, right.
Yeah.
You'd have to sort of take her name off some accounts.
Yeah.
You'd have to.
That's
Follow through.
Dang.
that's a little.
That's tough.
A common law marriage wouldn't spring into being until somebody dies here.
Gotcha. I kind of like that.
But if you did have a house together and you were never married and you separated, you're going to be in family division for the parenting case. But now the family court doesn't have jurisdiction over the house that you guys bought together. So you're going to have another case in probate court because that's where the title, the house is going to end up.
Yeah.
So now you've got two separate cases in two different courts.
Damn.
Jeez, that just makes it worse.
Yo, shout out to Ryan Graves for jumping on. I see you. And Nicole Perkins, haven't seen you in a minute. Saw Perkins the other day, but
Ryan Graves.
Let's pray he never has children. I'm just kidding, Graves. I love you. But
That's awesome.
yeah, shoot.
So, has communication with your ex gotten better since the filing of the case?
It's I wouldn't even say it's gotten better.
Gotten worse.
I mean, we don't talk.
That's
so
worse.
right. We don't speak unless we have to speak about the kids. That's it. So I would say it's better because we're really not speaking, but it's, worse because we're not communicating, if that makes sense,
So, when you communicate, are you guys able to communicate in a neutral manner?
Yeah. We don't, it's not, the arguing and that, or not arguing, we don't really argue, because if she asks for something, just like you said earlier, I go to the paperwork and I'm like, no, you can't do this, blah, blah, blah. Or yes, perfect. Those are your days. Awesome. But we don't like bicker back and forth anymore about stuff. Only if we think the paperwork's off on something or we haven't looked at it yet. That's the only time. But for the most part, it's just we're asking simple questions. All that negative stuff is, to the kids, and I'm hearing it later and fight whatever, So, but yeah, I would say, we're not getting along like Pelini, but we can communicate without arguing back and forth.
Which is a pretty big goal. I mean,
It's
communicating goes a long way. I mean, regardless of this, wherever you're at in the whole process, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So, how did you guys, both of you, deal with significant others, or has that come up?
What?
And, your exes having a significant other, does that come into play for either of you?
Well, yes and no. I mean, she's, technically, I guess, moved on, but there's no like in terms of like a father figure. No, not for the
For your first there is.
for the first one there is, but that's been that was
Yeah, so long ago.
7-8 years ago that she's married. She has 3 kids of herself, so she has our own little life, and we actually hang out. Sometimes we have barbecues. I mean,
Yeah.
so that's
And for me, it's like I would love for her to find someone. She sort of did, and he's a great guy, and I was like, that's exactly the person I want to be around my kids. But I feel like there's less arguing and less of that stuff when that other person finds someone else, and you kind of both move on, and now it's just for the kids. But I feel like my stage, it's more trying to make me jealous or something of having, a significant other. And it's not really, she's moved on and, so still at the pettiness of all of it. But we'll get there one day. I'll be like Pelini.
my situation is not perfect. It took a while, but I mean, I think.
Yeah, 3 months.
No, that part, yes, it took a hot breeze, but I definitely think communication was probably our biggest. Like, if we didn't have that, we'd probably be
Yeah. I mean, that tears everything down.
Worse situation, if not worse. You know what I mean? Than what you're going through.
I don't know if it gets worse.
It's not that bad.
So, how long was it before you say you hang out together now sometimes?
You and your exes and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you always do that, or how long did it take?
Well, when I was married, I always made sure, like, even if we're not like friends, because we had a blended family, that we at least had a mutual respect. I mean, we don't have to necessarily like each other, but hey, he's going to be a stepdad. He takes care of his family. He's, works hard. Hey, I pick your battles. You know what I mean? I can't get mad at a guy that's gonna do essentially what I'm doing on this end of the spectrum. So I always do my best to make sure that we at least get along and have a mutual respect and then lucky enough that grew to the point where we were all able to, have
Be in the
barbecues
same room and all that.
be in the same room.
I wish we could get there. I mean, yeah, I wish it could be that that simple on my side, but
I mean, it wasn't easy. It was a lot of,
Right.
there was animosity at first. There
Right,
was,
absolutely.
jealousy. There was still, I had to, defend my wife a lot of times, but obviously try to keep the peace with
I remember
the
all
previous,
Yeah.
the previous ex. And obviously, we argue sometimes, and there was always a thought that she would go to, the courts and.
Yeah,
file
were you
file-
were you ever like scared? Like,
Absolutely.
damn, what if she goes to the court?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because obviously, if that's not what I want at all,
Right.
Because obviously, I want to make sure it's a lose for both, And obviously, the child suffers the most because now it's limited times even more for the kids, and then now it's going to affect my household and my marriage because now, that all of that affects my marriage and the respect that I have for my current wife. You know what I mean? So it was definitely not easy by any means at some points, but luckily enough, I was able to work it out. For it took a couple of years, but got to a point where we were good. You know what I mean?
So if you take nothing away from this except this next comment, this is probably the most important thing I could impress upon anybody. If there's any way for you to avoid going to court, do it.
100%.
I'm telling you.
You said that. I think you said that.
I would have avoided it in a second. I would 100%.
I've been doing it for 20 years, and if there's a way to screw it up, it'll get screwed up in court. And this is not bashing courts or judges or anything, but you're essentially taking your life and the time with your kids and your financial interests and telling a stranger who's never met you, never met your kids, has no idea what your family's like. And like you said, make a decision that I'm going to live with for the rest of my life in the next 30 minutes.
That's a lot. Well, you didn't think that's a different perspective to think about.
Yeah, if there's any way to avoid it, I absolutely would.
Okay, so another question is that let's say one of the spouse did it out of pain and anger. Can they, reverse that file or motion, or whether it's child support, divorce, or any type of filing that's with the courts? Can you be like, oh, my bad, never mind? Is there anything like that?
So you can, well, it depends on what you mean by reverse. So you can, the only thing that replaces a court order is another court order. So
let's say the stereotypical version, let's say the mother of one's child files for child support and the man thinks it's out of spite. And then he finds out it is out of spite for whatever reason. Can she go, my B? And then they be like, oh, okay, reverse it? Or is it like, no, now we're going to dig into it. Now it's final. Now you're going to be paying.
So it depends on where you are in the process. So if you went to the first appearance, and then the first appearance you go to mediation,
Yeah.
and you work out an agreement. You have different kinds of agreements. They could be a temporary agreement or it could be a final agreement. So if you submit a final agreement to the court for the court approval, and the court approves it, your case is essentially done. Now, if you change your mind, you guys can go back and submit a different agreement for the court to approve, but you're going to need a court order to change the prior court order. Now, that's different from a temporary order or temporary agreement. If you haven't gotten to the final hearing yet, at any point prior to that, you can withdraw your petition because you haven't gotten a final hearing. You haven't gotten a final order.
Gotcha.
And at any point during the process, if you guys want to put it on hold, the court rules allow you to put it on hold for up to 2 years before the court's going to dismiss it for lack of prosecution. So you can put it on hold or you can withdraw it before a final hearing.
That's at least some hope, because I do know a couple. I do know a couple couples that, the guy's in a new relationship and then the new girl is pushing for peace. So he thinks the only way to get peace is to file whatever stuff necessary with the court, which obviously might make things worse. You know what I mean? Which is obviously kind of good that you can kind of postpone it for 2 years, or at least slow it down so at least get past the sheer anger, that state of mind, to
Right.
really figure out what you're doing before you make a wrong decision here.
Right. And keep in mind, if you get to the final, well, even a temporary child support obligation, there's a court order and nothing is going to change that but another court order. So if you get a final child support obligation
Mm-hmm.
and the couple ends up reconciling, they go back and live together for years while the kids are still young. After 5 years of being together, they decide they don't want to be together again and they separate. But they never change that child support obligation.
They're still stuck with that obligation.
Yeah. Whoever was paying
Damn.
go back and have to pay that for the 5 years that they were together.
Woohoo.
You've got to go back and get a court order that changes the first court order. Otherwise, you're going to owe it. Even if you have an agreement otherwise.
So okay, so let's say I get married, divorce, child support, remarry the same person. Does remarrying cancel that out, or do you actually still have to have the court order to cancel that court order?
Remarrying it.
Yep.
In order to get divorced, you would have to have a second divorce from the same person. So that was sort of
Gotcha.
interrupt
Okay.
the first one.
Okay.
But if you just went back, lived together for a while, never got married, and then just separated again,
Yep.
you would still owe that child support. If you didn't go back and have it interrupted by the
I'd be
court.
so pissed. Oh my God. But then again, you're an idiot for going back with that person.
Well, we want to reconcile relationships here. That's what we're trying to do.
And that actually happens a lot. People come into my office. It's not uncommon when they come in and they say, I want to file this. We have an agreement from like 5 years ago to stop child support. We just never got it approved by the court. And I have to tell them, well, it's...
If she's still mad at you, then you might be paying a couple grand.
Yeah.
Damn.
It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I'd be pissed. Wow.
Well, it seems like the system in the process is not as biased as maybe the perception that a lot of
Right.
us men have.
But I feel like it's just more numbers and not actually, they don't have time or whatever it is looking into the life that you're about to just be like boom, 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 you know?
But it's also hard to dissect whether it's 5 years or 10 years of a relationship and the dynamic of a family home in a 30-minute session or an hour
Absolutely.
session to determine the next 30 years or 20 years or 15 years of one's life. So
Absolutely.
I definitely think maybe communication and teamwork hopefully goes a long way. So the time you do get an attorney, you're able to do your job a little more efficiently and not, have a Jerry Springer in your office and then be able to present things to the court where hopefully both sides, might lose a little, but they also gain a little bit, whether it's peace and more teamwork.
Yeah. One of the things we haven't spoken about, you kind of touched on it earlier, was the alimony aspect.
Yep.
And you had mentioned, 10 years?
Yeah.
But again, there's no fast and hard number. So the court's going to look at the length of the marriage.
Yeah.
So the longer the marriage, the more likely you are to get it. A long-term marriage is like considered 10 years and longer. A short-term marriage is 5 years or less. And then if you're in that 5 to 10 year range, you're kind of in that gray area where you might get some, you might not.
Yeah. So
Well, there's two things. One, do you think that from a male perspective, we're looking at it wrong? As in, if our marriage failed or our relationship failed, it's maybe not a consequence, but paying child support or there's obviously going to be unfair gains in the situation. So should we really be mad at ourselves for the situation that we're in? Do you know what I mean? Like, why are we mad that we're paying child support? Or is it the exact
my
dollar
reason-
amount that you're mad? I'm talking about in general.
right.
You know what I mean?
I mean, I think I'm mad
That's the
because
responsibility of having kids.
right. I'm mad because I'm paying child support and have my kids almost 50% of the time. So it's like, why am I like, it just doesn't make sense to me. And on the other hand, I'm doing things with my kids. So it's like, it's hard. Now I'm paying for them to do things. I'm paying child support and I have to pay my bills. It's like, I am, it's crazy. And it's hard as hell. So it's like, I just don't understand
But from the woman's perspective, if you were, let's perceive, the breadwinner, it's going to be just as hard, if not harder, on her end to do the same thing and have the same thing.
Get a job. Get a job.
Yeah, but exactly.
You have your kids have less
Yeah, but
time.
she also has to work and have a sitter as well.
Absolutely.
Same as you.
Absolutely. But the thing that I'm saying is now you have the kids half the time less, 50% less than you did. Are you just sitting around doing nothing?
Well,
I'd
imagine that she's not doing that. I don't know.
Right, but it's like, why do I have to pay that now? You know what I mean? Like, why am I making up because you don't want to work? Why do I have to make that up? You know?
You're subsidizing the time that she doesn't.
That she doesn't have.
Right. If you want to cut my child support in half, cool.
And you'd
but
be
make me pay full child support and have the kids half the time, it's like, how does that even make sense? it's crazy.
It is a little. I mean, from that perspective, it is a little wild.
Right.
I mean,
I can't afford to do anything. Like, if you saw my paychecks, you would just start laughing. But it's just wild to me. I hope that system. I hope UNH steps up their game and changes that system.
But it's also a failed relationship. It's an unfair or unforeseen event. So I don't think there will be ever a equal 100% solution that both people ever be happy with.
Oh, definitely, probably not, unless you can get along the way you get along.
That's what I'm saying. If you guys don't get along and you come from a place of love and not pain and anger or fear or defense, whatever the case, there's always going to be a loser in this.
But guess what? I mean, I would say until the kids are 18, because the second you start giving somebody money, they're not going to say no, especially if you have to pay them. You guys are good and you guys are cool, but you still are paying child support. They're not going to be like, you know what? Just, you don't even have to give me that money anymore. I'm good. Why would they ever do that? You're going to be paying until they're 18. Even if you guys are cool, I feel like whoever it is, they're never going to be like, you're good. You don't need to pay me anymore.
So you think in order to change your circumstances, you're going to have to go to court to get a court order?
Right. I mean, when you're getting, when your rent's being paid, why would you change that situation? You know what I mean? Like, even at the end of the day, if you're good with the other person, you're not going to be like, oh, let me just cut off this. You don't need to pay child support anymore. I think we're cool. Like, we don't need to do it. I just feel like that will never happen. They're gonna be cool with you, but yet you're still gonna be having to pay child support.
So the review every 3 years, do the courts look into one's, like, both parents' life, or is it a matter of, do one of the parents have to go to the court and file for the review?
So nothing's automatic. So once you get to a final hearing in your case, you have 30 days to appeal.
Okay.
If after 30 days nobody appeals it, your case gets closed. And it doesn't automatically reopen.
Reopen every 3 years and get relooked.
Right. So if somebody wants the court to look at it, somebody has to go file, it's called a petition to bring forward, which just reopens your case. And you tell the court what you want to do at this point. Otherwise, it's just going to be closed in a storage somewhere.
And so the other thing is, so if you're making whatever money you're making now, you're paying child support, and then say, 5 years down the road, you end up making more money, and can she file and try to get more money from you 5 years down the road just because you're making more money now?
Yes.
That's insane.
But it's going to be retroactive to the date that she files.
Right. So 5 years, whenever the time was, but still, like, the court system's going to be like, yeah, you're making more money now. I think you should pay more child support.
You think that's unfair or fair?
I think it's unfair as hell. 5 or 10 years down the road, and then if they want to up it just because you've done well or you're making more money, why would you have to? You haven't even been with this person. They might have another a woman or a man living with them, and bringing expenses in that way.
So her income and your income are both going to get put in the formula.
Right, but say she has a boyfriend who's living with her. will they take his income or vice versa, a man with a woman
man
or
and
whatever,
a wife, and
So
unless they're married.
they're not going to put income into the calculation for purposes of figuring out the child support amount,
Yeah.
but they would factor into the equation the expenses she's not paying now. Does that make sense?
yeah, because obviously if her debt has gone down, that means she might not need as much income to offset that.
So in your case, she meets somebody else, they move in together.
Yeah.
And there's an adjustment, a modification hearing 3 years down the road.
Yeah.
The formula is not going to include his income with her income, even if they're living together,
Right.
because that's not her income. So they'll run the calculation based on your income and her income. But where it would factor in is he's covering half the expenses. So her living expenses.
Just
are
only
a
half.
little lower,
Well, but
yeah.
wouldn't that screw me more?
Well, no, because now she's got lower expenses. That increases your argument for deviation.
Oh,
down.
expenses. Okay, I thought you meant what she's making.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So the opportunity to balance out or be lower, pay to stay the same or go down for you.
Well, no, I'm just saying in general, if 10 years down the road, I'm making more money, and then she decides to, or anyone, I'm not aiming this at her, but they decide to ask for more because they know that you're making more money. It's just crazy to me that would even be, they could even bring that to court and be like, yes, you owe more money. I mean, I know some dude who's lived through that, and it blew my mind the amount of money he was paying. But I was just like, and then they're already getting an unbelievable amount of money. And then they the woman tried to get more, and I don't even think she's working because she gets so much money from child support. She isn't even working. So it's just like, I think that's bullshit. If she can't handle getting a job and raising her kids, then you should lose custody of your kids. It might be aggressive, but I just, if you can't work and you can't be a productive parent, you shouldn't be a parent.
But it's hard to make one law and then also have flexibility within that law.
Well, right, but
You know what I mean? 'Cause
I don't think child support
Because
should go up.
if
That's what I'm saying.
If
I think
you've been married for 10 years and then you were the breadwinner and you had a career and she just stayed at home and then you guys divorce, you can't expect her to go out and get a job at that same level.
Absolutely,
of
I do.
life. And what are you talking? How is
5 years later,
Yeah, but
10 years later,
if he's a CEO or if he owns 14 dealerships or whatever the case, and she only only graduated high school, there's no way that she can jump into a 6-figure income.
she absolutely can. But you're getting alimony at that point. If you're is that what you're talking? You're getting alimony,
But only so much.
right? But they've already
That's not
figured out
enough.
they've already figured out that you'll be able to live off that alimony, right? In court.
Well,
I'm talking about child support.
Right, you would never have to pay alimony.
Right.
You guys were never married.
Right.
I'm talking about
Alimony's
alimony.
different.
I'm talking about
di-
alimony.
Yeah, that's different. You can't reclaim. You can't go ask for more alimony. What your set thing is,
I
that's
think
what
you
you're
can.
paying.
Can you
Well, there are certain circumstances you could go back and sort of ask
get
for
more
a
alimony?
new way.
If
Wow,
really.
that changes things.
Yeah, there's
But
a-
even if you're not married and they're making just because they're making more money, you're not married.
They can get you twice.
How? It's insane.
So if you were married, let's say hypothetically, you got divorced.
Yeah.
The court issues its final orders,
So awesome.
and you do well. You're happy. You want to go out and celebrate.
Yep.
You buy a lottery ticket to celebrate,
Yep.
and you hit Powerball.
Yep. Get it.
That part of that's going to go to her.
But that's
Okay.
during
That's
the process.
No. The day after you get the final decree in the mail, you celebrate by buying a Powerball ticket, and you win.
That's bullshit.
How?
So because you already had your final, shit was already decided. But I mean that's great. But what about 5 years down the road? Can you
Same
still
thing.
get more
Same
alimony?
thing.
You getting millions of dollars after the final decree is a substantial change in circumstances that she could revisit.
5 years down the road.
10 years down the road. Yep. Give it up.
You're for,
I'm about to burn this house down. 10
Give
years
it
down
up.
the road, they can still come after you, even though you're not
still
married.
part of their life. You don't check out after 5 years.
Unless they get married, then it ends.
No,
right?
they can still
Alimony
get
ends.
you.
Chris, you're killing me, Chris.
Tell him, Chris.
You're
Preach.
killing me.
Preach.
Usually that is one of the stipulations to receiving alimony.
Yeah. Because then you have that second
Then
income.
there's two it right.
Yeah.
Right. But you, for what it's worth, you were never married. You don't-
No, I know that. I'm just fighting for every other dude out there
Yeah,
because this is just wild.
Yeah.
Or a woman out there. I'm fighting for the women too.
No, you ain't.
It's just crazy. That's crazy to me.
That's awesome.
It's crazy to me because it's like, why don't you just work? Like why? Like same as unemployment. You're getting money. And I know people. I feel like more than half the people do this. But just like unemployment, you're receiving money from the government or from the state. Why would you go out and get a job when you're getting free money? You're not going to put the effort into going out and getting a job when you can just type a couple things, receive a check every week. What's the incentive of working?
But there's two things. One, if it's hard to get ahead even when you're doing good.
That's life. It's hard.
Yeah,
You
I
gotta
know.
work.
But then you throw in unfair or unprecedented circumstances like divorce and child, everything else, that makes it almost they're gonna barely break even.
No.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
talking about you're already receiving alimony. You're already
Yep.
receiving money. I'm just talking
Yep.
about if they're being greedy and they want more. I think that's unfair. After years after they're
But
already
that's
separated.
your perception of what is greedy and what is more.
You're not in. It's like you're not in my life anymore for 5 years, but yet you can still try to come after me for money. That's what I think is crazy.
but your life has gotten better.
You're talking about alimony now?
Alimony or child
Any
support.
type of money. Any
Yeah.
type of money.
So the alimony statute is based on one's ability to pay and the other side's need for it. So if you have somebody who's making ends meet, no problem, they're not working, they're paying their bills, just because you hit the Powerball doesn't mean the court's going to give her more
Right.
money.
Right. So,
They're
but
going to look at, can she make ends meet? Can she maintain her lifestyle? Is it excessive? All that's going to come into play.
yeah.
So, if she's got plenty of money coming in, she just wants more, that's not going to qualify under the alimony statute.
Right. Okay. See, that's what I'm.
There is some kind of guidelines to cap it off.
And I understand, child support. I get it with the kids, but it's just like, just because you're making more money and for that person to ask for more, to me, it's like, instead of asking for more, why don't you go work and try to make more instead of being greedy and try to ask, being lazy and try to ask for more. That's my thing. It's like,
But I think a lot of those, what you're talking about is, I would imagine, a small percentage of what people are actually going through. Because a lot of divorces the careers are based off the sacrifice of both spouses.
but you're talking about alimony now. I'm talking about child support.
You're talking about child support?
Yeah. If you
then you why not? You're responsible for that kid till they're 18.
understand that, but if I'm already paying that set amount just because
Yep.
I'm making more, why do I need to pay her more if she files and says, you're making this much money now, I need this now because you're making that? We haven't been together. We broke up 5 years ago.
Right, but so take the hypothetical where the kids are like 2 and 3 years old.
Yep.
So you got 15 years left. So 5 years post decree,
Yep.
expenses increase, cost of living goes up. Like
And the
that's-
child,
But now,
kids
do
are more
they-
expensive
but,
too.
But because the whole thing is, whoever is paying child support, the other person receiving it is responsible for all expenses for the children. Am I right?
yeah, for the most part.
Right. So, when you go to court, do you have to start save? Like, I bought clothes for my kids here. I did this. I brought my kids out to dinner here. Like, do you have to bring that into court and be like, this is what I'm doing for my children already? Why do I need to pay more if they're getting literally half plus I'm paying full amount of child support? Will they take that in consideration? And be like, you don't need, you don't need more money for them. They're fine.
Right. So if you're paying for things like extracurricular activities, sports fees, music lessons,
Yeah.
whatever, that all should be coming out of child support. So
Exactly. Right.
You should keep track of all of that
Yeah.
because she's essentially double dipping because you're getting child support and you're covering expenses.
Yes. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Yeah.
Gotcha. What is this? What are they saying?
No, it was just my sister.
She coming through with a
About
question?
to catch up on the podcast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out because I was,
Yeah,
yeah.
you're about to flip the table.
I just thought it was crazy. I thought that was crazy because, you know, I say it in a smaller scale, but I still do a lot. When I have my kids, I have my kids plus other kids because they want their friends over, and we go do whatever they want. You know, we went to York's Wild Kingdom the other day. We went apple picking. We went, you know, and that's expenses that, you know, I need to pay. So it's like, how does the court not look into that and say, like, you know, I'm not just going to sit at home and play with sticks, you know, with my children. I'm going to go do stuff, you know, and that stuff costs money.
Right. So when you fill out the financial affidavit, one of the paragraphs to fill in is visitation expenses. So all of that would go in there.
So in my situation, though, I didn't have my kids that much. For that court thing, they gave me more time with my kids. So in my affidavit, I didn't have them that much already to begin with.
So that's why there's a temporary hearing, and then you move on to other hearings, and then you're moving towards a final. So adjustments like that can be taken into consideration before a final hearing.
All right. Well, yeah, I almost flipped that table.
Yeah, it was a good. Yeah, I'm glad there was no casualties. You know.
Damn. Yeah. Well. All right. Well, I think we're back. We're back. All right. So yeah, our camera died, but we're still going. But yeah, thank you, Chris, for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think a lot of people got some good questions answered, and yeah, I think people are going to be psyched on this one. There's a lot of information.
Yeah.
So.
Please watch the podcast. Share it. Episode 4, Law and Order with Chris.
Law and Order.
Dan Modern. He's closing us out tonight.
All right. Well, there's two sides to every story, and this is our side. So thanks for tuning in. We out.
Peace.
Listen, you can't hold me down.